very interesting time as we look into 2018 with everything that's happening in the region. As a business leader, it's very difficult to forecast past perhaps 6 months at this stage.
Yeah.
What's your take on 2018? Should we have a bullish strategy for the region? Should we have a bearish strategy? What's your take?
Yeah, I think it's definitely interesting times, right? Not only in terms of uncertainty, but in terms of the velocity of that uncertainty, right? And how much it's actually moving at the pace of change. You have to have a bullish strategy. If you have a bearish strategy, you're gonna lose in the long run. So the question is, how do you do that bullish strategy, right? I mean, how do you change resources? How do you actually look at new adjacencies? So for us, it's definitely a bullish strategy, but it's the big difference is how, and I think that's going to be the key win on how to move forward.
So a key thing there for me, and this is when we talk to a lot of our membership, is around flexibility, something that we've spoken about quite a lot. Particularly, we talk about organising budgets for 2018.
Absolutely.
We describe it as the F word that everybody keeps using when you talk about budgets. The F word is flexibility.
Yeah.
But I think there's two trends that when you look at the region in 2018, while it's difficult to forecast and see what's happening, it is quite apparent that one of those trends is this idea that the rules of the game are changing in the region, in the sense that many of the companies like you guys around the table that have done business here for a long time, they have got used to policy being crafted in such a way that it was about more around consensus, and it was slow but steady, it was conservative, but it was deliberate. And now it's much more around action. So for businesses, and looking at it through the prism of a business, how do you try and manage that? Like, as the leader of Philips in the region, and particularly when you're having conversations with Franz, with the global CEO, must be tricky to try to explain to him that, it's a very fluid situation, right?
I think you said most of it, and I can only confirm. I still think that, I look at these glasses and they're still more than half full, right? And I think that is still the feeling that I get from our head office. There's still a lot of excitement around the region, and of course everyone reads the paper, wherever you are in the world, so there's concerns about the volatility. I think if you take the positives as a starting point, right, that is the basis of our discussion, but I think like every business leader, you got to get a return on that positivity. Because if you just talk about the opportunity and you never bring it down to a return for the company, then at some point I think you're done talking. So that is what we're trying to do. We're trying to really look at what are the most concrete opportunities, what are the mechanisms that we can introduce ourselves to get a return. I'm often worried about the cycle time, and many opportunities have a very long cycle time. And I wanted to say what you just said is flexibility. So you need to make sure that your front and your back office, that you are very well organized, that you can move things around, that you can reallocate budgets. You don't want to get stuck. So you need to be ready for change. And what we're trying to do is also with our people, we always try to build stretch targets. And if we stretch it, we all have a great year. But also the additional stretch that we generate can make up for something where we fall short. So you try to bring some of these partly fun, partly necessary scenarios to end up where you want to end up.
Colm, when you listen to multinational companies talking about this, the cycles for Dubai duty free or big government related entities, are you guys to a certain extent, do you guys are in a better position that you don't perhaps have to look in such shorter cycles? Because obviously working with Sheikh Ahmed and Sheikh Mohammed's vision for Dubai is much more long term. Would that be true to say?
It's true to say it's long term.
But there's still pressure
but it's
on
also very, our attitude will be very bullish for the future. Our attitude for 2018 would be extremely positive. And although certain things are happening in this part of the world right now, things happen in different parts of the world all the time. And in our case, an awful lot of our business depends on two things: the number of passengers that come through the airport, how many of them we sell to, how much we sell to each one, and how good we are at encouraging and getting our staff as a team to work with us. I think the attitude in Dubai hasn't necessarily changed at all. It is still very positive, progress and bullish, and that's our attitude for next year.
And what are some of the risks you'd see in 2018? Because I know, say 2016, there was a lot of strengthening of the dollar would have an impact on your business. How do you see that playing out?
Well, that has eased considerably now, and it's good for us because in the past year we have not had to offer discounts to passengers to the same extent as we had before, and we're actually 190 million plus on last year in our top line. And I think it's very positive. Other risks, of course, you hear people talking all the time about the introduction of excise duty, about the introduction of VAT, which is going to happen on the 1st of January. I think it's terrific. I think it generates funds for the government, and secondly, it gives an indication of the great value Dubai duty-free are offering.
I was going to say it's great for you, and it's not so great for me if you're not giving discounts on duty-free anymore, but still. What's Facebook's take on 2018? And perhaps you're in a nice position in terms of Facebook all over the world sees remarkable growth, but particularly for this part of the world in 2018?
Yeah, we're definitely also bullish, and I think it comes down to the kind of business that we're in, right? If you look at the region and what's happening in the region, change is happening, and a lot of it is digital change, right? If you look at what they're trying to achieve, it's all about digital transformation. So I think as long as you are in that business in any shape or form, you will win out. So I think as long as you're part of the digital transformation, it's going to be positive. So I'm positive. I also think, while economically it's difficult right now, I think, we talked about headquarters, right? And what do they think? I do think from our conversations, they see it positive because they see that if this works out, the opportunity in the future is so much bigger, right? So it's economically difficult right now, but if we manage to make the transformation, the private sector will become bigger, and suddenly the pie for all of us is going to grow considerably. I think that's really the mid-game, is really to try to make that pie bigger for the private sector.
Yeah, it's interesting. I talk to a lot of the family businesses, right? I talk to a lot of our multinational members, and Arjen would come to mind in terms of, naturally very focused on P&L and focused on how you're going to hit your growth targets and the risks in the region as well. And when I talk to the big family businesses that have been trading here for decades, hundreds of years in some cases, they're much more blasé about the risks in the broader region, because they see it as, well, we're doing this forever. When has there not been volatility?
And everybody has to go on to the modern sort of way of doing business. And Dubai Duty Free, we introduced 2 years ago a click and collect system. We now can talk about the business we do. We did 70 million dirham business last year on this online thing. So sure, it's coming.
Yeah.
Sure.
In terms of the digitization journey,
Huge.
This is something big for your
Huge.
clients.
I mean, obviously, we've seen, 2018 is going to be the tipping point of digital taking over the total media spends. So I think, Jonathan, being one of our best partners, can attest to that. So today it's not only about being online, it's about what the utility that the consumer gets.
And we've just introduced Apple Pay. We've just introduced Samsung Pay.
The best thing about digital is the fact that next year, I think competition is not going to come from another company. It's going to come from the fact that software will be so strong, computers will be so smart, that Apple Pay will happen in a microsecond. Yes. So today, for example, you leave Dubai with your Emirates ID. You no longer need your boarding pass because everything is connected. Well, maybe next time you're going to leave with your Apple Leave instead of Apple Pay, and then you go to Dubai Duty Free and you do Apple Pay. And you Apple Board, whatever it is. So that's the kind of integration that's going to happen. And I think
but big disruptions for business, right?
But a massive
big disruption for
opportunity
healthcare
as well.
No, but I think that, we've also been around for a long time, 125 years. And in fact, the company was founded by two brothers. So maybe there's a little bit of a family element there as well, right? But I think if you want to be around for long, right, and I think everyone here is not planning on stopping tomorrow, you need to be ready for disruption. And what I find here in this region is that we're always looking at what we can do, and that is what I like so much over what often happens in my home country. We look for roadblocks and then we try to institutionalize them. It's much better to get things done. embrace that disruption. And I think for all of us, it may be different things, but of course we are also all about digital. You know, if you're not jumping on that journey, probably you're not going to be around for another 125.
And this is, by the way, also true for digital players, right? It's also true for us, you know. People always assume we got it all figured out. We have a lot to figure out still, right? And if you think about
even Facebook,
5-6 years ago, we were a desktop company.
To venture into mobile.
With the mobile.
And exactly, and consumers had already moved on. Consumers were already on mobile phones, and we had to catch up.
Yeah.
And that was a pretty drastic change for our organization back then. I remember it. The whole organization needed to change. It needed to come top down. Mark didn't take meetings anymore.
Absolutely.
Where products were presented were desktop first. You had to
Well, I've
reschedule the
certainly
meeting.
caught up on the.
but it's a fancy old phone, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's still not completely.
At least the battery lasts longer than
Yeah.
your smartphones.
It doesn't have face recognition.
I don't think it has any recognition whatsoever.
Okay, so digitization on the one hand is this big opportunity, but it's a disruption and potential risks to some businesses. There's also risks in terms of what's happening in the region, but what are we doing in terms of hedging for that risk? Now, for me, obviously, on the line of work I'm in, you're all going to smile. I would say you need to have great research,
Of course.
and have access to the right information. But you also perhaps, you know, for a lot of the multinational companies, they need to look and stagger the investment that's happening across the region in different countries and say, okay, if we're going to invest in X country, the situation seems to be very fluid. Let's take, first of all, the wait and see approach, and then if we are going to move ahead, these investments need to be staggered. What are the other, particularly a company like Philips, when you look at ways to kind of hedge risk as much as is possible in the current environment, how do you go about doing that?
I think there are a few things that you can do internal. So one of the things that we try to do is be as robust as possible in all our processes. If it comes to the way we spend our time in the market with customers, we want to be having data underpinning that, so that you know what you're doing and where you can get your return. And I think we're going through a journey, and I see huge impact of conscious decision making. So I think that's very important. The other thing that I try to do is just create my own investments, right? So we're trying to manage productivity. I think if you manage productivity, you basically create your own oxygen, and you take it from one location and you move it into another location. And we talked earlier about flexibility, and I think that combination works really well. So yeah, there are many things to say, but maybe just leave it at this. These are a few things that we're trying to do.
We're doing something very similar. So there's two aspects to your question. There's the revenue side, right? So on the revenue side, we want to diversify our services and therefore diversify revenues. So if one of the revenue line items kind of loses some steam, at least we'll pick up. So that's how we hedge from the top line. But from the cost center perspective, I mean, again, technology has helped us a lot. So today, most of media on digital is managed programmatically. That means it's machine to machine with some guidance from humans, right? Rather than having actually booking orders coming out. And I think that trend is going to happen more in 2018. So how do you have that machine and man marriage? And how do you make sure that you have a diversified revenue? So we're no longer doing one thing. I think we're doing around 17 things. Whether it's social media, creative, content, planning, strategy, buying, and all.
But is there risk in that strategy as well in terms of spreading out to so many areas?
Of course. So you have to do it in a very smart manner. You have to be agile. One of our 4 tenets, right? So do it well, but then take a decision and be brutally honest with yourself. Are you going to actually succeed? Is this something that is sustainable, or is it something that's a one-hit wonder for 6 months? So we're also being very critical to ourselves, and we're being very honest with ourselves, right?
How long do you stick at that, right? In
Yeah.
terms of maybe the strategy isn't working,
Yeah.
and my instinct is to stick at it and see, give it the right amount of time, right?
It depends.
How do you know when it's actually a dead duck?
It depends. If it's in the red the first 3 months, but then you can see some glimmer of light, then you stick to it. But there are things that your experience, your gut feel tells you over and above data, that tells you this doesn't smell right, this doesn't seem right. So we've taken some decisions accordingly. But again, being in Dubai, being in this region helps us to kind of experiment, especially in our industry. So we're doing that.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point that Arjen made earlier in terms of being in Dubai, a place it's a word that's used as a cliche in this part of the world, but I genuinely feel that it's true of Dubai and the UAE in terms of this vision.
Yeah.
And you know, even with me, with starting my business, there's something infectious about Dubai, and to be in a place that's so ambitious rubs off on you.
It's a catalyst.
Yeah.
It's a
Definitely.
catalyst.
And you're surrounded by people that are also ambitious and also want to try and do
And the
something.
story you've heard so often, in my own case, I came to Dubai for 6 months in 1983, and now I'm coming to the end of year 34, and that was because of the attitude that we can succeed, and the traffic at the airport that time was 3 million people a year. It was 84 million last year. And in our business, on what you have said, in our business, there's a few measurements that are very important. The percentage of traffic we sell to, the level of the sale we sell to everybody, and our return per square meter in comparison to the rest of the duty-free industry. And in all three of those things, at the moment, we are top of the world. And our attitude and ambition is that we remain there. We have to tweak every so often to make sure that happens. The level of staff, the return of each staff member, the returns per square meter. But we're certainly very positive about it.
I think what Colm is saying is actually the answer to your earlier question. So how do you manage a business? So you know your leading KPIs and you know exactly what is happening, and of course you need to stay close to those. And if there's a small change in the environment, if there's volatility, you know exactly what your leading indicators are telling you.
And we're already looking in Dubai World Centre and McLoughlin International Airport, which currently has a capacity of 5 million passengers a year. By the end of this year, it will be 27 million, and we're looking at 2025, when it will have 3 runways in operation, a capacity for 135 million passengers a year, and we have written in we're going to have 80,000 square meters of retail space there. And we studied it and looked at it in the returns, and I'm sorry to go on too long. The other thing is you have to change your trends depending, in our case, on the mix of passengers. And of course we've all heard so often in the last couple of years about Chinese traffic, and it is paying off very well for us that we now have 750 Chinese staff working for us. We have dual language system. We have people that can speak the language of the passengers, and you know, you have to change all the time.
When did you start doing that, right? When did you identify that this is the next trend, the Chinese passengers coming through, and therefore we need to upskill, or we need to have the right people in place to get that right? Around what year did you start to recognize?
10 years ago we had no Chinese staff, and about 5 years ago there was a wave, a wean off a little bit of Russian traffic, and it was replaced by Chinese. So 5 years ago we started recruiting our first Chinese people.
Just to one last point around risk in 2018. What keeps you up at night in terms of when you look at business in the region? And again, Facebook is quite an interesting, you're in an interesting position in terms of growth and the opportunity in the region, but still, what is it the potential risk for a company like Facebook in 2018, or what is it that you would worry about or keep you up at night?
I think the key things that keep me up at night that I think about is the transformation, because I do think this transformation is crucial for the region, right? So I think we are at this point right now where the region needs the transformation. I do believe it will succeed, and I'm inherently an optimist.
Yeah.
So I think that's good. But if it doesn't, then I think the region has a problem. Unemployment, something we talked about today, right? That's a big, huge problem in the region. It's a huge problem that keeps us up at night. So I think it's that, and then I think it is, for me, still the size of the pie, the size of the private economy, right? How do we make sure that we make that pie bigger rather than trying to compete with each other? I think the key thing is still to try to make that size of the private economy a lot bigger than it is today.
Yeah. Colm, what keeps you up at night, or you sleep like a baby?
Well, we're 24-hour service, so I stay up every night.
Very good.
You know, some trends come and they worry you, of course, and you have to give extra attention to it. But I'm a great believer in delegating stuff. I think we have the best team of staff in the duty-free industry. And I got to say, I sleep very comfortably at night.
Can I ask you a question? So, you've been working in Dubai for many years. is it a case, right? So as you say, business trends come along and they worry all of us, and you think, what's going to happen? How should I deal with it, etc. As you get more experience, do these things have less of an impact on you where you feel you've seen it before and you're more relaxed and you don't get stressed about? Is it a case that experience kicks in and you've seen it before?
In many cases, yes. And of course, every problem, irrespective of what it is, can be solved and has been solved many times in the past. And what's very important for our company is we see ourselves very much as part and parcel of the whole Dubai vision, and the positive attitude that's there. And naturally, we adopt the very same principles as the government do. And we get huge and terrific support from the government. I've said many, many times, our chairman, we're very lucky that Sheikh Ahmed is our chairman and is involved in so many positive things in Dubai.
I remember we were speaking at a conference in Dublin, and I was asking you about His Highness, and you said he's a superstar.
Yes, okay.
That was a very
and he's doing more and more all the time, you know. Nothing keeps me awake at night. First thing. Problems repeat and you solve them.
Yeah.
And you ask yourself what mistakes you made the last time and you avoid them.
And what did I learn from it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I don't sleep like a baby, but I sleep well. Because there are things that are going to impact our businesses that are out of our control, but things that we need to react to in the morning. You know, we don't only think for ourselves, we also think for our customers and our clients. And you know, out of the 83 plus clients that we manage, and the consumers that they cater to, I think the geopolitical nuances that are happening now are probably the things that keep them up at night, and therefore keep me up at night if there was such a thing. But you know, you just need to tackle it through. I think we've learned through our leadership and through my team, we just felt that there are easy ways to do things. We take the path of least resistance, and we always think of something with 5 scenarios in mind instead of just that one solution that is static. And I think that maneuvering is paying off. And I think that's a smart thing for us to do.
Yeah, I think I agree with that sentiment in terms of the geopolitics in the region is becoming increasingly complicated. Jonathan makes a great point around unemployment, fundamentally and structurally in the long term. That's something, particularly in North Africa, that is a massive issue that needs to be resolved or tackled. In the short term in 2018, I think it's interesting if we think back to kind of when the oil price started to fall mid-2014, it started to hit here 2015, 2016. You think about what set that off, that chain of reaction. It was really this tectonic shift in 2 parts of the global economy. One was around China having this slowdown and having an over-reliance on fixed asset investment and building roads and bridges, etc. And wanting to move to consumption-led growth. And then at the same time, so you had weaker demand for energy from China. That set off the chain reaction in the commodity side of the economy, and commodity-led exporters, particularly in the Middle East and Sub-Saharan Africa, all of us started to feel it. And then you had the shale story in the US at the same time. And you think what happened, particularly in Saudi, although it wasn't at the time technically a recession, for lots of our members, it really, really felt like a recession. So for me, I think about those big global issues. What were to happen, you know, debt as a percentage of GDP in China is about 300%. You have this mountain of debt in China. What if that tips over? Spills over, has an impact on the oil market, or the OPEC production cuts, that deal unwinds in a messy fashion. That has an impact on the oil price. And then for businesses in 2018, that's my worry. Now, to be very clear, you look at OPEC, and they're actually making quite a bit of progress. And the OPEC production cuts look likely to be extended into 2018. The progress they made in terms of meeting those pledged cuts have actually been pretty strong, not perfect, but pretty strong. So there's the geopol issue, and then the oil and how it spills down into economies. It impacts your clients, it impacts the governments that want to pay Phillips, it impacts advertisers on Facebook.
Yeah.
And this man sleeps like a baby because everybody's still going through the airport.